Yes, welcome. Sorry we've started a little bit later. We normally start about 5 minutes past, just to make sure that everything's going okay and people have got time to sort of settle down. I think we're all good. Standard now to ask if you're watching. Just let us know if there's any problems with the audio levels in the midst of the live stream. If you miss something, if it looks like something isn't working, then just give us a comment, and we'll be able to resolve it. It'll help a lot. Save us talking for an hour with a muted microphone. Great. Cool. All right, so today's live stream, let me look at my checklist. I'm going to start by acknowledging and pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we have been working, I think Katy as well, and sovereignty was never ceded. Thanks for tuning in. Friday, probably there's heaps of Christmas parties and things going on at the moment. Who knows? So if you're watching this live, then thanks for your commitment. If you're watching in the archive, then I hope you had a good Christmas party on Friday the 23rd. What else have we got? The structure. Okay. What we normally do is start off with kind of demonstrating the things that we did over the VR studio, like the studio outcomes. They're not always fully polished works or anything. It's a series of experiments or seeing what we can do with the different technologies and seeing where one test leads to another. We'll start with showing off some of those bits and pieces, and then there's heaps of time just to talk. So we can talk about the concepts, we can show some of the process as well if people are interested in the technical process. I know it can be a little bit much, but if people just want general sort of idea, I can go in and show some of the pieces. We can talk about kind of the concept of working with the technologies, some things that were good, some things that were bad, some things that we'd wish that there was more time to do, and then just open up to comments. But really, if there's any comments at any point through the live stream, just stick them in and we can respond to. So that works great. Yes, thank you for funding from Australia Council for the Arts and Create New South Wales. The project wouldn't have happened without them, and they've actually supported the last few years of VR Studio. Also, this video will be archived, and all of the last videos from 2018 up till now are available either on Facebook or on the website tacticalspace.org, or on YouTube. So when we're done, this will be stuck up there, but for the moment, all of those older archives are there to be watched. Find this one. Great, cool. So I should introduce Katy Plummer, who is a fantastic artist, fantastic creative human being. I don't want to set my category too narrow. Who has been this studio's artist. I'm terrible with introducing people as well. Everyone already knows how great Katy is, so I needn't say any more. I can say good things about you. Fantastic, amazing, effervescent, inspired. Yeah, great. It's so good. It's a joy to be able to yeah, sorry, let's go into it. Cool. So should we talk about what we did? Do you want to? I'm going to stay quiet now and allow you to talk. And while you're doing it, I can sort of drive through the examples now, little bits. That sounds good.
Cool. So just kind of talk about what was interesting to me about VR and kind of what we talked about, like those sorts of things.
How about what we've actually done for this bit, and then we can sort of come back around and talk about more general things. And while you're
Okay,
talking
great.
about it, I can sort of bring up some images and bits and pieces on the screen.
Yep. Okay, great. So what we've made it is kind of, it feels like the germ of a bigger idea to me. We started with these little kind of dollies of characters, sort of like just little kind of like little ghosts, little spirit ghosts. And we did, and then Josh somehow magically put them into the computer. So kind of stripped them of their materiality. Oh, look, they are in it. There they are in an Uber. So I made them and put them in an Uber, and they had their first trip across town into Josh's lab, and then he did whatever it is that he does, um, whatever magical thing that he does, and they entered into kind of this non-material world, which was really exciting. And then he started to kind of give them movement, and we started talking about how we could make, what they were doing and where they were, and how we wanted them to interact with sort of potential viewers. Yeah, so there are four dollies altogether. They don't have names. They have kind of loose character. They were all really surprising. Each of them I started out with a really different plan, and then kind of just ended up with these four really distinct armless personalities. None of them have arms for some reason that I don't fully know why. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get to some of them, kind of scan ones just of them as they are. Let's see.
Scanned.
There, so this is kind of the remnants of the turntable that I scanned it on. Just pull in some of these images. And I guess we were talking when we was well before actually getting stuck into the studio. There are a few ideas that went around, um, and one was the very early one. Well, there are two ideas very much earlier, and then that I don't know if you'd care to talk about. And then the more recent one, do you want to talk about that sort of seed of the idea that you had, the most recent version of it?
Yeah. So I guess I think what I was thinking of is kind of like, the spirit world as being a place that's kind of distinct and that exists. And sort of something that kind of crosses over with our world in various kind of ways, according to rules that we maybe do or don't understand, or do or don't, necessarily believe in, or do or don't have an experience of. But I was kind of thinking of like, so the spirit world kind of comes to our world and interacts with us in various ways. And I was thinking about kind of what happens when what's the world that they might occupy when they're not knocking over glasses or bothering us in the ways that kind of culturally, traditionally, they're supposed to kind of interact with us. So I was thinking of kind of like a sort of a backstage environment, where they might all be sort of sitting around and talking and like smoking and just kind of preparing for their performances, and a VR experience where we could kind of go and visit them there. But in that space, which is, in their realm, we would be the ghosts, and we would be the ones who weren't able to kind of like, interact with the world in kind of, we don't understand the physics of their world, we don't have the right equipment for their world. So I was just kind of thinking of this kind of, a VR as an opportunity to kind of haunt this backstage place where they were all getting ready to haunt us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's which is super fun. I mean, there's so many nice things to play with around. Um, I would consider sort of what happens when you go into VR, and we've talked a little bit about this. We've talked quite a lot about it, but not necessarily quite in this way. I think of the experience of going into VR has the potential to be very similar to that kind of onboarding is a really unromantic way of referring to it, but this kind of a delineation, a separation of kind of the everyday life and this experience. Actually, that's a word that is almost always used. It's so vague and not fantastic. The idea of an experience, the VR experience, rather the VR XYZ. But that idea that you are sort of passing through into a particular type of into another space, basically,
Yeah.
in that process of going into VR, and that's one of the reasons why I like it a lot more than augmented reality, because it has a kind of magic quality to it. In my mind, also I think the politics are a little bit better, but
Yeah.
this idea of the backstage being already loaded with the anticipation and this weird kind of like behind the curtain thing that's really interesting, along with, I mean, it was really interesting hearing you talk about your experience of VR. Um, I think probably in contrast to a lot of people, a lot of the artists before who hadn't done VR at all, their first exposure was going through some of the experiences that had to introduce a really good kind of artful use, effective uses, and also just kind of like stupid shooter games, just so that people had a sense of what the audience might expect of VR. You know, it's like if everything that people see through VR is something stupid in a particular way, then the audience will frame their expectations of something in a similar way. But your discussion over kind of the disembodied, the weird tension, I suppose, because everything you engage with the world in VR through this undeniable embodied engagement. If a character in VR comes and feigns a punch at you, you flinch probably. For what's good for you if you sort of self-preservation. But at the same time, often there's a kind of voyeuristic or a observer, an unbodied observer element. Do you want to talk to that? Because I found that really.
Well, I think that I actually have a kind of quite a physical resistance to the idea of VR. Like, I know that that is something that we kind of struggled with is I don't want to put that headset on. Like, and I think that in many ways it's because my relationship with the physical world is pretty tenuous,
Mm.
and and a little shaky, and I often and my relationship with kind of consensual reality is is a little wobbly. And so the idea of untethering kind of my senses from my body, I find really pretty scary.
Mm.
And I have done it. And, I teach, I'm a lecturer at UNSW, and I've had students kind of bring VR projects, and, so I have done it, but I find it extremely disorienting. And I think actually, and I think that that is actually the feeling that I kind of wanted to explore, is this, rather than kind of convince a viewer that they actually do have a body in this environment. I wanted to kind of like lean into that disorienting. I'm actually a visitor to this place, and I don't understand the rules, and these people seem to have a body and I don't have a body. They can see each other, but they can't seem to see me. Um, and kind of, yeah, so I think that's sort of what I was thinking about, is how to kind of create that feeling of, or just lean into that feeling that already exists, lean into that feeling of disembodiment, and kind of just being a little bit unbalanced by that.
Mm. When you were talking about that sort of the relationship with consensual reality and the hesitation to go into VR, I mean, one problem as well is that there's a duty of care in having making these experiences. And if you talk about it from a, if you are the sort of person who does performance art and you give an audience a particular experience, you might feel like you have a duty of care to debrief them from that experience, or gives, you know, based. I mean, duty of care says everything that you need to. Basically, you have to look um, after people when you put them through certain experiences, if you need to at all. Um, and games don't have that at all. They just, or not all games. There's a sort of growing. There's an improvement in the sense of what you are trying to do to your audience. But that idea that you don't know what people are going to do, even if it's badly designed, it's like kind of breaks the duty of care if it's designed badly, so it makes you feel motion sick.
Right.
But also, jump scares and things just for the sake of getting something out of someone, all sorts of things that you can do in an experience, where it's like
Yeah.
missing that duty of care, and you can't assume it when you put on a VR headset, experience something that they've manifested that duty of care as far as it could.
I think that that's actually some of my resistance as well, is the kind of just actually not knowing what's going to be what what I'm entering when I put
Mm.
on a headset. That just feels extremely disorienting and like a loss of control that I haven't consented to.
Mm.
Everybody's just like, put on a headset, and I'm like, "Merp, I don't, you know, like, unless I know what I'm entering, because I do think as well, one of the sort of the facts about me is I'm extremely suggestible, and I like, that's why something like theater I find really like I really love it, and I really, you know um because if you show me a shadow puppet and tell me it's a character, a character in a story, I fully invest
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that story really quickly, really easy. I don't need any bells and whistles. I don't, I just kind of um invest in a reality really quickly and really easily. So not knowing, and knowing that about myself, makes something like, just kind of putting on a VR helmet feel really yeah, dangerous and destabilizing. So yeah.
It's interesting because I mean, me too. I absolutely get totally taken. I remember being in lectures, and if the lecturer accidentally spoke slightly louder on certain words, or like knocked the lectern while he was saying something, it just went straight into it, like, like high attention, kind of like hypnotic suggestion sort of level of attention to things. And also, totally taken by characters and theatre.
Yeah.
Apart from when it's, things like Sleep No More, which is this kind of interactive, um, expanded theatre thing in New York that I kind of loved, but I did have an interaction with one of the performers, and it was difficult because there's a contract and you don't know how. I could go all in, but I'm pretty certain that the actor is not prepared to go all in. They're not a method actor, and nothing's going to come of it. So there's kind of like a sign. You will reach a point where your commitment to it isn't equal. I'm thinking about that relationship to space and going into these unknown. The reason why I find it fairly comfortable, assuming that you're not playing some dumb game that's just like, isn't made with attention to the audience, is that a lot of my experience is of, I grew up moving around quite a lot, and the my experience of virtual spaces in games, fictional virtual spaces, is of a certainty and a safety that
Mm.
isn't necessarily there in the wider world. So even the paradox, this great paradox of first-person shooters, you'll start on a level, and often the sort of the world building, the environmental storytelling is really rich. So you can just walk around and sort of understand the story of some dystopian, post-apocalyptic, whatever. It's very archaeological in that you can have that distance to it and just sort of observe and learn um, for some part of it. But there's a heap of bad guys. Once you've killed, there's an absolute hostility to the game while you're playing it at the start. But once you've cleared that level, nothing will happen. You can stay there for 20 hours and just sit in the environment. And that, for me, a lot of those virtual spaces, I mean, there were online kind of VR social things, 2.5D VR, where it's just like different characters on the screen with text when they're talking. That was interesting as well, and quite comforting. But my experience of virtual environments has been one of um, a refuge.
You're right.
Yes. Yeah, so I kind of I feel like at least there's the potential to find a space, and whereas the precarity of renting a space in Sydney or whatever, you can, like you're living in your car, you can still go into those spaces and it's have that relationship to that space where you're inhabiting it, in an emotional sense, which I suppose it goes back into what you were saying about taking considering it real,
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing, working in VR. Uh, yeah, I really like that as well. That really resonates with me. But do you want to talk about that concept of sort of the virtual and considering it real?
I will try. Um, I think that, you know, for me, when I talk about kind of having a tenuous relationship with, the physical world, and I'm somebody who kind of has kind of her foot in other realms, and and that has often been kind of a source of anxiety, and something that I felt like I need to hide, and kind of like try to I would always kind of use art to kind of try to process that, but I had this idea that I really kind of couldn't talk about it explicitly, and I think, and then a couple of, I'm going into too much detail, but a couple of things happened where I sort of, a few years ago, kind of just realized that I had to kind of just integrate this more explicitly into my practice, and stop fighting it, essentially, and stop kind of, like, because what am I trying to say? It's like that question of, is this real
Mm,
or is this not real, is extremely kind of distracting at some point, and just really gets in the way of actually doing any useful work in this area. So kind of, and so all of this sort of happened in this really private, non-verbal space, but just this kind of, kind of my solution to this question became, well, what would change if I started treating this as if it was real, like just actually built my life around it, built my practice around it, let it be true, and
mm,
just stop asking that question. Because at the end of that question is, I guess, really, is this real or am I going mad? Like, am I, you know, unwell? And yeah, and that just felt like a really not useful dichotomy, and not a place where I could actually process the material I needed to process and make the work I needed to make. Um, so that's kind of the root of that sort of decision in my life, is to kind of go, okay, these ideas and these feelings and these kind of like characters and these, voices and these sorts of, these realms are real. And if I treat them as real, I say the thing, I point at the thing, I give it a name, and then I talk to it as if it's real, um, and just let that be true. And that has been so kind of, I guess, freeing, and has sort of just let my work and my thinking and my kind of just existence kind of just be a lot less fraught.
mm,
And yeah, so that's kind of also the feeling that I, like when we started talking about VR, VR is this kind of imaginary space, and it sort of feels in so many ways like, it has so much in common with the way that kind of people talk about kind of other realms and spiritual space. Um, it seems to have a lot of the same kind of just kind of rules of physics and kind of ways that people can occupy it. So yeah, so I just started thinking about, if we treat that space as real, and this is a place where these characters live and these characters behave, how would it be to visit those places?
Mm. I
If that
think
makes sense.
the concept. I've just put the VR stuff in the background because I was um, aware of the fact that nothing had changed. I hadn't really shown off any of this. So what this is I can't demo it on the headset at the same time of live streaming and everything because I think it would be too taxing for the machine, or at least there might be some jitter either in the live stream. But this is some documentation that I've made of being in the headset. We could actually talk to these different ones in a minute, but I just thought I'd put something in the background that's communicating a little bit of the project at the same time as we're talking about. The thing that I really like about that taking for real, um, I mean, is that if you don't take it for real, then it allows it, the companies that are saying we are going to spend the majority of our time, social time, virtual, and then they are having total control over what that virtual space is. And they might, on one hand, their marketing and all of their promotional stuff is saying how much this is a real part of your life, a significant, consequential part of your life. But then they get the benefit of the ephemerality of it when it comes to people saying, actually, it's not okay that you have utter control of
Right.
this virtual space. Or,
They go, oh,
you
we're
know,
just joking. It's not real.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not. Look, it's in a box, in a little black box with flashing lights on it. How is that something you have to worry about? In the same way of a whole bunch of different things that have massive impact into how we live, and somehow they
Yeah.
get out of free. I feel the same about augmented reality, and we talked about this before. I'll just say it quickly. That idea that if you say how great it is that you're putting an intervention into the public space with augmented reality, and you're either like you're misrepresenting how you actually feel about it for the sake of bluster, or there's a problem that you haven't consulted land councils or whatever this thing there. And I think probably we're on the same sort of level where things that are, it doesn't really matter what's real. We're living in a death cult where like corporate profit is above the continued human life sort of stuff. Like the things that govern people's lives that they consider real are things that lead them in very weird and um, destructive directions. But things that people believe affect them across the board, affect your health and affect your, what you're going to do with yourself and how, yeah, every element of your life. Um,
And
and
affect how
yeah,
reality behaves. Like,
mm,
they, the, yeah, like how you look at something actually affects how it behaves,
yeah, absolutely.
just how you feel about it.
Yeah, so it's I think I don't know where are we going to go with that. Maybe we should talk through the different scenes. Um,
Hmm.
I'll just do it quickly. So Cuba came in on Wednesday, and we used the motion capture suit to get some performances of different behavior in these different scenes, and then some dancing at the end. Just in case this stuff didn't work out, we have a changing room scene where they're just preparing and having and chatting. Sort of the idea is that you're there, kind of as a fly on the wall, and they're having like little chatting about. I think the audio, which I didn't manage to get in synced up, was about whether you liked Patrick Swayze or not. And
That
then the
sounds like Cooper.
important question to ask. The little dance scene, which is there kind of as a backup, because there was quite a lot of complexity to the motion capture and how they might interact with objects. For example, they don't have hands, but they would sort of move. They were holding brushes and things. The dancing was just like a fairly straightforward bit of motion capture where I didn't have to worry about their objects intersecting with other objects and things like that. And it's just a nice way of showing the expressivity of the different characters, um, without having to spend a lot of time adding objects and bits and pieces. And then the smoking one, each part, each bit of motion capture in each ghost, their behavior at some point in the cycle of the motion capture, they would kind of pay attention to where the audience was looking. So this one was quite good. It's hard to communicate the difference of seeing it on screen and being in the headset where you kind of read that, you read the tangibility of the character, and you read them like a living aware thing moving around in your space, and like that look, even though
Yeah.
it doesn't have eyes, when it does the head look around to look, pay attention in your direction, you still get exactly the same sense of it. And yeah,
Yeah, so it's kind
yeah.
of like that, it's they're these figments of our imagination, but if we give them a space, to inhabit, like what are they doing when they're not, performing in our imagination? Maybe that, even if we did invent them, now they exist. And so
Mm.
now they're kind of off waiting until we need to pull them back into our imagine or, as our psychic play. And yeah, so they're kind of just back there getting ready and doing stuff and smoking and talking about Patrick Swayze. And then you turn up and they can feel you, but they can't see you. And they talk about, oh, yeah, this place is haunted, or, oh, it's one of those again, one of those. I've heard that about this theater, that it's, you know, yeah.
Yeah, which I love. I do love that. I mean, it's funny as well to think about the power of these characters. What you were saying before as well, this interesting transformation of going from sort of the idea into the doll, the sort of intangible into the physical, and then back again into the digital. And
Because that's really what so much of my work is about, is kind of like giving in my imaginary, that's what I do, is I give things a body, I ground things, I give things a body. I take kind of weird little feelings or weird little ideas and give them a body. And then it was just so strange to have them shed that body and go into this, and then see them as the thing that I'd made, but in this kind of disembodied way, was so bizarre.
I felt a little bit, because some of the I felt a little bit worried that the motion that I'd give them, or like just the subtle way that you put the motion onto the character, because there's a lot of variability to how you do that. That it might be totally wrong to how like the little dance. I try to not do things that were absolutely off the wall. It did occur to me when I sent the one, like you thought that the crow character was stoic, and then I made them dance silly way.
No, I felt like I didn't know who that was. It was such a kind of a German of an idea. And then when I saw him moving, it was like, oh, that's who he is. So it really did feel like a kind of like I was learning about that character at the same time.
Yeah, that's fun. I did. We did spend some time, before doing the dances as well, and sort of like just giving Uber the dolls again to sort of think about the motion. Um, yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, another thing that occurs to me as well, kind of in the context um, of stories in a game context, is that you can have a character that is like well or badly written, but it just, if it grabs an audience, then you have thousands of people cosplaying that character and writing fan fiction about them, and creating this. Imagine being someone who creates, or in this context, like I think be quite exciting to imagine a point where if this was characters in a game, there would be hundreds of people turning up at conventions trying as much as possible to cosplay these different characters. So good.
That would
Uh,
be Halloween costumes. I mean, I'm in.
yeah. Um, Cool. Where did we go with our bits and pieces? We've talked a little bit about the magic circle. Is there anything you want me to show? I've got some different examples here. I can show some.
Yeah, I think probably are there four scenes,
Yeah.
kind of potential scenes?
So we've done. First one was in the wings. Um, this is just sort of his smoking in between or before performance. The alleyway behind the theatre. Um, up and we've seen this in the documentation video, but yeah, it really surprised me when the character, because you're sort of standing there and you do have that sense of being um, a, an observer. It's really funny that the way that people sort of sit in these games, because if for the vast majority of first person games where you don't have a body, you also have a particular kind of potent agency. So you're running around and you're like shooting people and stuff, and you can very much interact with things, but you also can kind of be an observer without the vulnerability of having a body.
Yeah, I was really interested in the idea, like if this was, again, this feels like the germ of a much bigger kind of idea. But I was really interested in the idea that you could affect things, like if you if you kind of happened on just the right sequence, or tried really hard, like you could, like in those kind of movies where a ghost kind of works out how they can affect something. I was really interested in that idea of being able to kind of like get a character's attention and have them suddenly turn and look at you or look at each other and go, did you hear that? Or what, yeah, just kind of having just a little bit of agency and kind of ability to manipulate the physical, the physical, you know, the physics of that world.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so with that character, I always just kind of imagined them just kind of like suddenly, just getting a chill and going back inside because that laneway always gives them a weird feeling. So.
Yeah. Um, um, yeah. I just showed the. It was funny. I just showed the couple of little videos from things, and at the point where you said, "Did you hear something?" was exactly the point where the character in it started. Uh, yeah, I
Yeah,
love
so I
this one.
guess we did sort of embed things, I suppose, in the space. If it was something that we were making, we would embed things in spaces that you could find, that you could move, or just find a way to kind of like move the story in that way and get them to kind of look at you.
Mm. Yeah, which would be. I mean that thing as well. Just talking about being in the headset, but when people make eye contact, it's really particular. Um, it's like if you put eyes on a. If people are more honest in the presence of pictures of eyes.
Oh,
So just because we've kind of built to be aware of people looking at you, I suppose. But yeah, it works quite well. What else have we got? Do you want to? I mean, how does this fit in? Or maybe I can prompt a little bit of a discussion around that idea of like scrying and tarot and divination, and then the idea, because we had some conversations as well about how this space is kind of a staging space for allowing the characters to do their thing in a particular way.
yeah. So, like, I think that I think what we were kind of thinking of is that, so this is backstage, and the stage is the place where the kind of that really, where sort of, these characters play the part, of kind of psychic agents, like kind of like they do what, they tell whatever stories you need to hear, or your kind of ready for or looking for. They answer the question that you kind of called them forth to answer. Um, yeah, and so I think what we were talking about is this. I kind of I'm often recently I've been really drawn to sort of using kind of digital technology as a kind of an oracle. Like I've had a couple of projects now, and I'm just working on another really big one where you use kind of digital chance-based technology to kind of like answer questions or give you meaningful information. And it's sort of based on this idea that the world is just kind of dense with meaning, and also what is kind of dense with meaning, and also is aware, and the world wants to talk to itself all the time and kind
Mm.
of communicate with itself, and wants to communicate with you as part of itself, and sort of like it will use kind of whatever avenues and frameworks that you give it. And, so there are all of these kind of frameworks like tarot cards and astrology, and all of these, all of these ways that kind of people have sort of set up to allow the world to kind of communicate in this densely meaningful way, and help you make sense of it.
Mm.
And so there are all of these pre-existing systems, but often I find those really kind of loaded and hard to work with, because you have to kind of like, I guess, enter into somebody else's framework to kind of fully appreciate them.
Mm.
And so how I've been working is kind of just setting up little mini frameworks, like, I have a digital oracle project that I've been kind of working on in various forms for a couple of years. And it's just like I've invented this character of the pink ghost, who in my mind and experience exists as an entity. She has a kind of quite a distinct selfhood, and she had the way that she communicates is her kind of mission statement, like what she wants, is to be useful and to help people with things. And so the tools that I've given her are these 48 cards with little kind of scraps of text, just kind of really open-ended poetic images. And so you go and you interact with this oracle, and she pulls one of these 48 cards, and it's completely by chance. There's no algorithm, there's no, every time you have a 1 in 48 chance of getting one of the cards.
Mm.
And yeah, and then people, and what's been really kind of, and that's kind of how I move through the world, is just kind of asking questions and receiving answers, and like, kind of in communication with the world, with the meaningful world all the time. But it has been really wonderful to see that working for other people. Once you kind of like give you just sort of say, this is the framework, this is the personality that we're dealing with, this is their job, go, and sort of just letting that unfold and letting that work. And yeah, she's just been that particular, the pink ghost, has just been so incredibly helpful to me in these really startling and funny ways. Like kind of the classic story about the pink ghost is, I had this idea for a really big scary project that was kind of well out of my league in many ways, and well out of my abilities, and I needed a composer suddenly. And I was thinking, I don't even know what a composer is, like, really, or how to find one, or how do I know, if I find one, that it's a good one who will understand me and be able to kind of work with the idea, things in the ways that I want to work. And just pretty much a week really after kind of having this thought of, oh crap, I need to find a composer, I get this email through my website, from a composer named Sally Whitwell, who is incredible. And she was saying, I just wanted to reach out and say hello. I met your pink ghost in Abercrombie
Oh,
Lane,
wow.
and had this really great conversation with her, and she told me really amazing and meaningful things. And I don't actually believe in that stuff, but it was really amazing. And now I'm writing a song cycle based on your 48 cards. I hope that's okay. And I was like, oh, that is totally fine. And also, would you like to talk about this other project? And now, we are working on this project together and it's really exciting. And really, I just want to work with her kind of maybe for the rest of my life. And also, she lives across the road from me. Like, it's just, like literally I could throw a rock and hit her house from my house. So it's just, yeah, just things like, just there are lots and lots of stories like that, and lots of stories that people have told me as well about just kind of how helpful she is, which is funny because that was the job that I gave her and that was the thing that
To
I
be
learned.
helpful.
So
Yeah, it's not what I
yeah.
was expecting for that story, that they would introduce you to someone new. But that was beyond their capacity. But I like
It
that
wasn't what
story a
I
lot.
expected. I didn't even ask her for it. It just kind of like, she just kind of heard me, I guess, and said, well, I'll see what I can do. And there've just been lots of things like that where she just kind of turns up with the goods. And
I think, I mean, there's an interesting thing um, with those autonomous, those things that in theory you've made and put out into the world, those characters that you've made. Like I did the Muppet Abdul, and then that it had a life of its own. Like in a lot of senses, it had the kind of vivacity to get to roam all over the place. And then through
yeah,
that, someone saw this character, this thing that wasn't me, doing its thing that was in somehow separate from me. It's like I can't control what it's going to do. And then, yeah, it's similarly introduced me to people through that.
yeah, and I think it's really like, I think it's really easy to get hung up on the question again, like that question of, did I make this or did this already exist, or is this real, or am I just like that? Just like, I understand that question and I understand how that question makes sense. But for me personally, it's become really not useful or interesting. Like, I am just much more kind of excited to just go, I don't really care
Mm.
if I made it or if it, like, what's the difference between I made it and it exists, and
And it's
is it imaginary,
semantics.
or
It
yeah, is it
depends on
real?
how
Like,
you want to frame it.
exactly. And I'm just much more interested in going, okay, well, what's the conversation that I can have with it, and how can I set things up so that it can have conversations, meaningful conversations, densely meaningful conversations with other people, and like, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I suppose. I mean, the thing about this one then is that these characters, other than it's hard for them at the moment to be face to face with.
Yes.
That is almost a smooth segue into talking about what you would want to do now that we've sort of experimented and you've seen them. I mean, it's really nice as well. It is Kuba kind of performing, and there is like it's quite a nice motion capture suit. So it gets, even though it's like weirdly transformed into these characters, there's the ability for very subtle movements to be kind of brought across, and like little moments of hesitation or just very very subtle things. Although he was,
There he is peeking around the curtain at the audience. He's getting
yeah.
ready to go out on stage and do whatever the audience requires of him to do. But he's just having a little peek first because, he's that character. But then he's also, like, not an actor. He's just like the guy himself.
um the
Yeah.
so what would you want to, what has this opened? I mean, it sounds almost like a little bit cheesy to say, okay, well, we've done this thing of experimenting with these different bits. It's kind of at the argument is that it introduces allowances, like constraints and allowances, gives sort of like areas to move into, potentially. I and yeah, please talk about what else you'd
Um,
like to do, what you found interesting in.
well, yeah. So, I think we've talked about, like, I really like to kind of close loop. Like, I actually
Mm,
had my head into this project because it wasn't like, I'm gonna build this world and then we can't go into it.
mm.
Like, people can't go into it, and that feels like I just don't quite know how to enter that. So, like, real, like, I feel like I've this is just like, I can, what am I trying to say? yeah, like I just want to make this a place where people can go. Like I would just like to build this more as a place
Hmm.
where people go and actually come face to face with these and other characters. I'd like to know what, I'd love to make it something where you could kind of like watch a play, like maybe you could even kind of like get them to act things out for you, like things that you were having trouble understanding. I don't even know, like I don't really know what's possible, but I really love, I guess, the beginnings of the world that I'm starting to see here. I love the kind of the backstageness of it. I'd love to sort of see it from the other side as well, like as an audience member.
Who I've
Yeah,
not
I don't.
actually, where he's not spotlit. I was just thinking we could stick him out on the stage. This could be his big performance. I mean, I could do that for a second, just for the sake
Yeah,
of
I
we're
don't know. It'd be nice.
experimenting live. Um, I'll add a spotlight in. You continue talking because I'll just be staring gormlessly at the screen for a moment while I'm trying to set this up. Um,
Continue talking is maybe the most scary thing that you could say to me. Just keep talking, like, oh, I
just act
don't have,
natural.
yeah, I don't have
Well, sorry
that.
about
I can only say things that I mean, Josh.
that.
Um,
Okay,
oh,
he's been
look, there's a spotlight.
thrust. He's been thrust into the spotlight.
Look how lovely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I would have like if this were yeah, I would love to build this as a world that people could enter and like build I guess build their own relationships with these characters.
Hmm.
I don't really know what their limits are, but it would be I guess really interesting. I'm working we've talked a little bit about this chatbot that I'm working with at the moment. I think it would be really interesting to kind of give them their own voice with some kind of like chance based technology, like, a machine learning technology where, like we could give a chatbot parameters that this character could answer or perform within, and then so you could kind of interact with them in a text way as well as physically. I don't know. I don't know.
My one hesitation with plugging them into GPT is that it's very hard to have a duty of care. It's like
Right.
introducing someone to a friend that you're not totally certain about,
Right.
um, because there is so much open possibility of what
Yeah.
they might say in that.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah. So, and I don't know all of the possibilities with that. But I guess so maybe it would have to be like it's not just like there and you can visit at any time you want. Like it may have to be kind of like moderated in some way.
mm,
Like which it would be if it was kind of in an exhibition format, I guess. Like if it was in an art context and not just a VR context where this
mhm.
exists and you can go there and have at it. Like I guess it would have to be kind of moderated. Oh, look at him cute there on stage doing his dance. um, so this is the first time I've seen this particular thing. So this is very interesting to me. Um, yeah, yeah, I don't know, like I guess I don't know exactly where it could go, and that's kind of the exciting and frustrating thing because it's exciting because I just can suddenly see this because it has a body suddenly, like even like it's not imaginary, it's not abstract, it has its own kind of body, so suddenly I can see its potential and I can see it as
Oh,
real.
speaking of body, I should get them. Just show the scale and everything. We haven't introduced the dolls at all. I've
Oh
just got
yeah,
them around the corner.
but yeah, like in the on the other hand, I just keep on like my mind will keep kind of racing into this world, and then I'll remember, oh, that's right, it's
Sorry?
finished.
I just scooped them up like a bunch of puppies.
Mhm.
Oh, a little bit transparent.
I can't see them.
Oh, sorry. Well, you know what they look like, so this will have to be
Yes,
the magic of cinema. Because
yes.
they're
Oh right, I see. Yeah.
they're amazing. I could have started with that. That would have been forethought.
Look, we're doing our best. Be enough.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. Um, we've reached the end of our time, but I'll try and anticipate questions for the future people. Or anything that we've missed. I think we've shown off all the different bits and pieces. Is there anything about the sort of process? I mean, it's pretty. I was some of the experiment as well was sort of like trying to um, like you'll notice that the scenes are it's kind of more gestural and the characters. There's a lot of stuff that was fairly new to me. This character actually doesn't have the cloth simulation stuff, but a whole bunch of the others with the hair and the cloth simulation was sort of the first time that I've done it in real engine. And I just wanted to get it right. I did know how to do it right. So this one with the fabric, the hair simulation, kind of one. But yeah, that whole the process and sort of going in and painting fabric texture. And I went in and sort of painted the threads with the little.
Nice little detail about this particular fabric for me also is that this is all cotton velvet that I hand dyed in just huge kind of meterage for bean bags for a Michaela Gleave project. So she has a project where she asked me to make these giant lava bean bags, and so I just have mountains of this beautiful splotchy hand-dyed velvet, and I'm really excited to kind of just see that turning up in various other things, as is she. So these are kind of one of their first outings outside of her project.
Yeah, and they're great. Very happy to have these in my hands. Yeah, it's also amazing. And hopefully it's sort of. I mean, it's such a weird process digitizing something because it's you can't feel like it's you're not cloning something. Kind of removing, especially these amazing handmade things. There's so much amazingness to the way that they're made that you can only kind of hint at representation.
Feel really convincing to me. Again, maybe it's just because I'm highly suggestible.
But that's good.
But I'm just there. Like I'm just with them. Like I don't doubt them at all.
It helps that I mean this one's expression is just so lovely. Yeah, they're great. I love them. It's the joy to sort of be in that, and really weird as well. It's like just standing in front of the that's just being in front of you. Just
I'm good about that.
I can't think. I think we've sort of done a reasonable job of going over anything. Yeah. I could talk about the process, but I mean it's all different. If there's no one in particular like immediately interested in doing it, then it's. Yeah, I think we might call it. That was fantastic. We should thank Kuba Dorobiowski for his performance skills. Also, I found it really funny that this one, like, I immediately thought of Shimon because of the long legs and the dancing skills, and then this one because I slightly did the hair rather than the kind of more. I'll show it like that sort of shape, and I made it a little bit more flat, and it kind of looks like Kuba to me. The
Totally.
funny hair.
I didn't. When you first said it, I didn't really see it, but then when it was moving, I was like, "Oh, there he is!"
Yeah.
Again, I'm very suggestible, but I was like, "Oh, look, it is. It's totally Kuba."
Yeah, it's good. Yes. So thanks, Kuba. Thank you, Katie, for joining me. For saying yes to doing the VR studios, despite the fact that you had reservations to going into awful VR spaces.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been a really great, really positive experience, and definitely something I want to come back to.
Awesome. Cool. All right, well, we'll end it there. And just so you know, this will be archived. I'll do a post about it, and I'll stick it with all of the rest of the archived videos.
Great.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.